Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ninth day of the 17th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference. I'm Bob Hales. I'm your moderator. We have with us Mark Freidenberg from Bentley University. Uh, he's interested in learning and teaching with new technologies. As such, he's the director of the CIS Learning and Technology Sandbox and is a frequent speaker on teaching with AI, immersive, collaborative, and new technology. It sounds like a lot of fun to me. And Mark was named for this year a Presidential Faculty Fellow at Bentley. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
And Mark's going to talk about the role of online learning in a place-based institution. Mark, it's all yours.
Thanks, everybody. I hope we can have this more of a conversation than a monologue by me. Um, so this is a presentation I was asked to give an encore of from the Teaching Professor Conference when I was there last summer. Um, the story is this. Bentley is a place-based institution. It's a business school outside of Boston. And when we returned from the pandemic, the question arose, what lessons did we learn? And what do students want? And what can we take from the pandemic and bring it forward? And one day I received this email that said the academic tech leadership team is trying to harness the professional development of our faculty, and we're setting up this task force to explore how we might diversify the modalities in which our undergraduate courses are offered during the academic year. And I was asked to be on this committee. We thought it was going to be a 6-month appointment. It turned out to be about 14 months. And I made the mistake of sending the email out to arrange the next meeting, which made me the chair of the committee by default. You can probably identify with that. And our task was exactly what's here: to explore how we might diversify the modalities in which undergraduate courses are delivered at Bentley. The motivation was that people were coming back, and online learning boomed during the pandemic, but we all came back, and uh, returning to the classroom was a new thing for us after not being there for a year. And we were, in some cases, spoiled by the flexibility, and in some cases, learned new ways of teaching, and really tried to figure out what we could take from the pandemic and bring it forward in our own learning. We learned, as the news headline said back at that time, that students wanted online learning options. They wanted the flexibility, the ability to take courses online, the ability to take courses in person, and but for us, that was a real conflict between maintaining the school's reputation as an in-place institution where undergraduate courses were only offered in person forever, and this new world that we lived in where we showed that we could learn online reasonably effectively once we got good at it. There are articles about this in the Chronicle of Education, Higher Education, where the where studies showed that online learning could be effective, and that really caused schools to think much more about how we can offer online learning. Because as you can see, students really wanted it. So the question that we asked was, how do we expand our involvement in offering online learning without compromising our commitment to providing a distinctive place-based education? My question for you is, how many of you teach online? Either raise your hands or write something in the chat so I can know. Jenna is almost entirely online. Is it online synchronous or online asynchronous?
I'll just unmute if that's okay.
Yeah, please feel free to unmute and talk to me. It's much more fun this way.
Yeah, for me, it's a combination. So I have a synchronous class, highly interactive, that we meet in the evening time, right? for students' flexibility. And then the rest of my class are fully online. But we've been online pre-pandemic, so I started teaching online classes in 2008, and 50% of our early childhood education department was online prior to COVID
Yeah.
or pandemic or whatever we're calling
Whatever
it.
that crazy time was. Yeah, I get it. Anyone else? So for me, I only taught in person, and at first it wasn't online learning at all. It was like emergency remote teaching, and then we figured out how to do it and did it better. So our team was a group of 4 or 5 faculty who tried to figure out what we're going to do. This was our timeline. We convened the group in April 2022. We spent some time figuring out what we were going to ask about, did some focus groups of students and faculty about their teaching modalities and their preferences, which I'll share with you. And then we also wanted to see what other schools were doing in this space. So we spent some time learning about the practices that other schools were doing. We also realized that any decisions and recommendations that we made for our university, we couldn't make without talking to the registrar, without talking to admissions, without talking to career services, without talking to the housing office, without talking to sports, because any recommendations we made could impact how student schedules were and where they needed to be. So we spent a lot of time talking with stakeholders at the school, and then we ended up coming up with a report that we shared with university administration, as you can see, about a year and a half later. So that was our timeline for this work, and I'll share with you a little bit about our process and what we went through. Where did we start? We surveyed faculty and students. We wanted to find out what kind of courses did you take. What kind of courses do you think would actually work online? What kind of courses did you do? Any courses that were use virtual reality or met virtually inside of virtual environments that weren't Zoom? We asked students and faculty, what kind of courses would you like to teach, and what modalities would you like to teach in? And also, we looked at what some of our competitors and also what other business schools were doing in this space. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we talked with other school folks at our university who would have to implement any recommendations that we might make in terms of changing course numbers or how it might impact international students or other students taking remote courses while they're still full-time students. So we started with what we were good at. Why do we teach in person, right? Because we know that teaching in person allows for students to be engaged and gives them understanding of concepts. It increases their ability to participate. We know that in-person learning offers good outcomes for grades because of the interaction with the students and teachers, and students and students as well, students with other students. Having a relationship with your instructor in many ways increases or reduces the anxiety that some students have about taking oral exams that are offered in asynchronous courses with a teacher they haven't met before, and also encourages problem solving. So a lot of these are benefits that we've all seen from teaching in person. Then we looked at what about teaching online and what are some other modalities that courses are offered in. And so we wanted to think about a set of common definitions that we could use to describe the different modalities for teaching. So asynchronous is where instruction is delivered exclusively online, but not at a scheduled time. The content is uploaded to a learning management tool and is accessible. And so that's what that is. My phone is ringing. One second. So hybrid and high flex. Hybrid and high flex are instructions delivered in person or during class time. And then we've seen immersive, which is using VR or other equipment. And then structured hybrid is where some students are in person and some students are online, depending on what the instructor wants. And synchronous remote is what we've all done during the pandemic, when we're all online and synchronously speaking at the same time. I'm curious to find out from some of you your teaching experiences in any of these different modalities. So please unmute and tell me.
I was waiting just because I don't want to be the one voice in the Zoom. Uh, all of these I've done, except the only one we haven't fully done is HyFlex, although we have a HyFlex classroom, but we have a contractual issue with HyFlex. We're waiting to hear, I don't know if it's still even happening, whether additional support can be given to those who would be teaching HyFlex, because you're essentially kind of teaching two modalities at the same time on ground for those who choose it, and then in our definition, and then online as well. But I'm trying to understand immersive, and I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit more what you mean by immersive.
Sure. Immersive would be a course that might be in a virtual meeting space using virtual reality headsets. So, for example, you might use a tool like Verizon Worlds from Meta or Meet in VR, and students would have a headset at home where for part of the time they could meet in a virtual space. So instead of being flat on a Zoom screen like we are now, they could actually interact with each other through their avatars in a VR supported environment.
That sounds super cool, but it's not something we do.
Yeah, it is super cool. It's not something a lot of people are doing, but we're playing with that. Anyone else want to add to this conversation before I go on to the next piece? So once we determine a language and identify different ways that online education might take place, we tried to figure out what are we doing now, and we surveyed all of our faculty and got 27% response rate. We surveyed a bunch of students, got 323 students, which is 8% of student body, which is not so bad. And we asked them, what experiences did you have with online learning? How good was it? And were you trained to do it? And how desirable were the experiences that you had in these spaces? So we asked them to rank their modalities for learning. You can see the blue is first choice, and the other colors go down from there. And so for faculty, in person, and for students, in person was the most popular, the most preferred all the way around, followed by most structured hybrid, and asynchronous was a mixed bag for some. Most people had not done immersive at all, as no surprise from what Jeanette just told us. And so that was something we wanted to at least put out there as an option, which we knew it was not happening very much. But clearly, in-person learning was useful, but hybrid learning was mixed in many cases. You can see around the way. The university felt that asynchronous was probably the way to go in terms of fostering materials that would be manageable for the instructor. Although I have to tell you, after teaching asynchronous this year, it's a lot of work, and different from teaching in person. Jeanette says online asynchronous is the preferred modality for your school, for your district. It's becoming that for us as well. That's ultimately what we ended up recommending. So I'll tell you more about that. I don't want to steal my own thunder, but let's keep going. We asked who had taught in which modalities and who had taken courses in which modalities, and we found that most people had done the hybrid stuff through COVID, or the synchronous remote through COVID. Immersive, nobody really, and then the async was a few courses were offered that way, and so some people had experience teaching or taking courses in those roles. Then we asked, what are you willing to do? And most students and faculty were in favor of teaching in multiple modalities during the same semester. So they wanted the flexibility of teaching online in some form and also maintaining the student contact in person throughout the semester. Here's an interesting question. I'm going to ask you to do the same thing. Please type into chat 5 words from this set of 20 that regards your attitude toward online learning. This is a set of 20 words or 25 words based on, or 20 words based on a set of words from a study that's used for evaluating software. Some of the words are intentionally positive and some of the words are intentionally negative, connotating it with connotations. The goal is to see a common vocabulary that we can use when describing online learning. So I'm going to ask you to pick, each of you to type into the chat 5 words from the sheet, the screen that you see here, and we can see how we would do in this little group around asynchronous or synchronous or other forms of online learning. So you can put those in the chat now. So Tracy says convenient, useful, creative, accessible, and disconnected. We'll see how close you guys come to what we did. Appealing, disconnected, again. High maintenance, absolutely. So let's take a minute and talk about some of the ones that show up a few times here. I think disconnected appears among our little group here at least 2 or 3 times. What makes online learning disconnected? Please unmute and share that. Or do I have to call on you? Monica, everyone's schedules are different. Also, I think there's a disconnect between the student and the teacher because you don't really see each other in person all that much.
But I would argue,
Go ahead.
I would argue your responses are going to be different depending on if someone has any experience with teaching and learning online versus someone who doesn't have any. I don't know how useful the responses would be.
No, I think that's a good point. I also see things like appealing on here, which probably gets to the flexibility of online learning that provides for us, and the convenience as well. I think it's probably more convenient for the students than it is for the teacher sometimes. But these terms allowed us to think about how we can position online learning. And I'll show you what we learned from this. Let's see. This is a spider chart showing students and faculty, and the students in blue, faculty in the green, and their responses, which sort of echoes some of yours, right? The convenience of online learning was probably the most popular. Time saving was really interesting for me to note that it was time saving for students, but definitely not for teachers, because now as a result of teaching online, you needed to all of a sudden write all these videos and make all these web pages and do more than you might normally do with your LMS to make your course accessible online. High maintenance, also much more for faculty than for students, which was an interesting thing to note. Convenience for both, accessible for both, and disconnected was also one of the words that we chose as well. So if it makes you feel good, most of your responses are in line with the results that we found as well, and probably for many of the same reasons that we found as well. So here we go, set up some focus groups to figure out what was going on here, and we asked both students and faculty their experience in teaching or taking online courses, strategies that they use to improve the online experience, so it's not just the speaker speaking or the teacher speaking the entire time. What it would take for them to be able to create or take online courses, and how we might use those to improve our teaching and learning. And we got, as you can see, 115 faculty responses, 300 student responses, and we categorize them based on the themes that you see here. And the shading shows the more popular responses in each category. So the focus groups really talked about ways that in-person learning is superior, and the problems of hybrid teaching, and the fact that if we are trained in doing so, we can actually teach well online. There were a lot of issues around technology, issues around flexibility. Everybody agreed that either fully online or fully in person is better than people all over the place. I'm assuming that's similar to some of the experiences that you've had. And then the bottom of the list were things like different learning styles. Some people may choose online courses or asynchronous courses, and others may not, because they need the structure of being in class on Monday and Wednesday at 9:30 every week. I'm teaching an online course this semester, as I did last semester, and for me, the structure of not having to be at school every Monday and Wednesday at 9:30 is a challenge for me, because I now have this extra time that is quickly being taken up by other things that I thought I would have when I'm not in the classroom. So these are some of the things our focus groups talked about. The things that we learned from the focus groups, here we go, are that in-person learning was preferred. Online learning, when everybody's in the same place, whether it's online or in person, was also preferred. And that successful online learning and teaching requires different skills than online learning and teaching in person. You can't just take your in-person course and go on and put the PowerPoints up on Zoom and talk for an hour. In any online course, there's really three elements, right? There's the students, the teacher, and the content. And finding ways for those three elements to interact in an online course is key to its success. In the online course that I created this semester, I needed a way for the students to interact with each other, and a discussion board wasn't going to cut it, because I wanted them to do more than just say, yeah, I agree, Bob, but really to find ways to collaborate and work together. And with tools like Microsoft Teams or other collaboration tools, created an environment where they could work on a project synchronously if they chose to, but asynchronously in teams if they chose to. So this was our focus group around desirability for online learning. When we looked at other schools, we saw that, and we looked at other business schools in the United States, we saw that most had limits on the number of courses that students can take online. There are certain compliance issues that we needed to consider, especially around students and visas. So, for example, a student couldn't take all of their courses from remotely and then not even be present at the university. We didn't want that for a variety of reasons. But we looked at there were different policies around online learning, and we had to figure out how we would deal with transfer students as well, and how many online credits we would take through online courses. These are the folks that we talked to: disability, international students, curriculum, advising, career services, registrar, marketing, to get the word out, admissions, administrative computing. And these are the things that we needed to think about. How are online courses going to be numbered? How is registration going to work? Can you have more students in an online course than you can have in an in-person course? Or should the course sizes be the same? How will they appear in your transcript? And what are the guidelines for taking online courses? So we considered all this and made some recommendations. First was To preserve the place-based nature of our university, we chose to allow sophomores, juniors, and seniors to take at most one online course in a semester. That would give them the flexibility to go on an internship. It would give them the flexibility to participate in sports or other activities. It would support students who have mobility issues and find it difficult to get to campus because they can stay home a bit more. So those are the things that we chose to do regarding who can take online courses. The reason we didn't allow first-year students to take online courses because they're just getting acclimated to the university and being a college student, and we wanted them to be in class as much as possible. We recognize that taking online asynchronous courses, which is what we went with, requires a different discipline, and we felt that the most first-year students might not be ready for that after just getting to the university from high school. Second thing was that we encouraged departments to offer, well, the checkmark means that the university adopted this recommendation. Second thing was encourage departments to offer courses online throughout the year, assuming people are willing to teach them. And again, we moved toward asynchronous, and this provides flexibility for students and faculty, and also allows in-person courses to take place as needed, and continue to support the university's mission of providing online in-person education, and also while still giving students options. Our third recommendation was to realize that creating asynchronous courses is hard. Why does everybody call on doing this? So creating asynchronous courses is hard and requires a lot of work and training to provide incentives. So the university needs to provide incentives for faculty to do so. Creating online courses is, if you've done it, requires creating several videos and rethinking how you're going to present the material. And so that was an important thing that we felt that nobody would do it, or there'd be much more of an incentive to do it if there was support from the university to do so. And so we asked our university to provide that level of support, both in terms of pedagogical teaching, instructional design, and training around teaching online, and specifically asynchronously. So we did a unit through Quality Matters, which had some teaching training around developing online async courses. The next thing we had to do was convince students that online courses aren't any easier than their in-person counterparts. In fact, in many cases, they're harder because they're less structured. You have to be more aware of your own time and your own work. And because they're not in person, the way you're assessed might be differently. For example, in my class, when I created async, we're doing oral exams or conversational quizzes because I can't lock down the students' computers or give them an activity that I don't know that they're working on their own. And I really want to connect with them and see what they're learning. So so the way you create an online course might be and will likely be different than what happens in person. So the reputation of online courses as being easy is that's something that students think, but will take a bit of time for that rumor or that perception to minimize. Finally, we again thought we were going to focus on asynchronous learning and then look at other modalities later on down the road. But because asynchronous learning allows for some of the content to be reused and it doesn't take less time to teach an asynchronous course once it's created, because you're still answering questions, you're still updating a website, you're still making last-minute changes. I don't have office hours in my async course that are fixed times because the students don't meet at fixed times, which means that there's expectations that I'm around all the time. If I showed you my Microsoft Teams channel on my phone, you can see that's how I do office hours, and I get lots of requests to meet with students individually there, and also checking in with them so that they know that you're monitoring their progress even though you don't see them is a really important step toward their success in online learning. We also we talked about asynchronous, we talked about alternative modalities like virtual reality, for example, and um, we wanted to create a way that we can look into create virtual spaces for learners, virtual reality or immersive experiences. Synchronous remote was the most popular. Asynchronous remote is what we're doing a lot more of, and beginning to explore virtual spaces like this. And finally, investing in new technologies and new learning spaces so that the experience is seamless and much more improved. And that means making sure the cameras work if you're teaching hybrid, making sure that instructors have the appropriate equipment at home and multiple monitors and good quality webcams and video editing software and things that it takes to create an effective asynchronous course requires access to technology. And finally, we recommended that the university create some faculty appointments with our teaching and learning center to implement forward-thinking teaching opportunities, because the Teaching and Learning Center has pedagogical experts and the instructional design experts have experience in that domain, but it's faculty who interact with the students all the time. It's faculty who have the in-class war stories about teaching and who can then serve as mentors to other faculty in areas that are of interest to them. And so that's something our university has also begun to do this year. So to summarize some of the accomplishments, online learning provides flexibility and balance both for faculty and for instructors, and for students, I should say, and it meets the needs of those who have challenges getting to class in person regularly for a variety of reasons, whether it's mobility or scheduling or family responsibilities, especially with adult students. Survey and focus groups showed that online learning can have a positive impact on the university experience with new opportunities that it enables. And our task force recommended that online learning be at least as rigorous, if not more so, than the in-person counterpart courses, and that faculty receive appropriate support for training and developing online courses. And then finally, we wanted to focus on asynchronous and courses. This is a slight change since what we recommended, but we've been focusing on asynchronous courses, which also helps with classroom shortages and also provides flexibility for students, and also looking into new ways like VR for teaching. And the idea is that by adopting these new technologies and these new ways of teaching, we can enhance student engagement if it's done well, if it's done right, promote collaboration and create a sense of community among online learners, especially in asynchronous courses where the students don't see each other, which is a big challenge. Let me take a couple minutes for comments and then I'll wrap up. There are questions.
I think one of the things faculty and institutions need to change is the mindset of when a faculty member is hired to teach, they immediately think, yeah, I'm going to teach face-to-face class. It needs to change to I'm going to teach, and it could be a variety of modalities. And all faculty need to have basics of teaching online so that when we have another pandemic, they can more easily move into moving their courses online if they're not already.
So it doesn't have to be a pandemic that could encourage require more online learning. Your university could be renovating a building which takes several classrooms offline, which requires some classes to be online, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be an unexpected situation that requires additional online learning opportunities. And Jeanette said that in California they had wildfires that moved classes online. So people move online for a variety of reasons, and knowing that we can do it is is important. And again, the challenges or the different modalities that we might go with. It's different teaching synchronous online, like we did, like I'm guessing Jeanette did some classes online synchronously versus creating asynchronous courses online as well. So those are some different things to think about, and also what who your stakeholders are in order to really implement um, an online learning program, whether it's asynchronous or hybrid in some way.
I just wanted to add that one of the trends I'm seeing this semester is students selecting online classes uh, because of their citizenship status, right? And not wanting to be on freeways and driving to our on ground classes. And so online classes feel safer to them, is what I'm hearing from students. And this is kind of a newer development, one that we saw,
Thank
you
you.
know, uh, years ago, but we're seeing a little bit of that trend as well.
Thank you for sharing that. So, so you've got my contact info. I appreciate all of your comments this morning. I hope this was useful and gives you a bit of insights as to the things that we thought about in strategically creating an online program for asynchronous learning at Bentley.
Yes, yeah. You guys have gone through the same process a lot of institutions gone through. And, I say in terms of surveying faculty and students, uh, the results are, I think, pretty much the same as everywhere. However, it's still important to do it because you want faculty and students to understand that excuse me, that you value their opinions and they have input into it. But
Right, and
I
getting
think
buy-in was
going
a big piece
into
of this
it,
process.
you should probably expect the same results 100 other schools got.
Similar, at least similar. So yeah, you're right. Getting buy-in was part of this process. Bob, thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Jeanette and Tracy and Monica for your and those who just left for your participation this morning. I really appreciate it.
Mark, I really appreciate you taking time to do this for us and on some really key elements.